Good evening. This is the Rutland Town Planning Commission, and it is March 28th of 2024. Thank you all for joining us. Let's start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. What? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And before we sit down, or if we don't mind standing again, I would just like to do a moment of silence for Fred Nicholson, who wore lots of hats in the town of Rutland and served on this planning commission for a stint as well. So a moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Public comment is next on the agenda. I think we just have the McNeils in attendance. Is there anyone else there in the room?
There is not.
Okay. So we'll go down to new business and the subdivision that the McNeils are bringing to us. This is 930 US Route 4, and I think Paul McNeil is in the audience and ready to take our questions. But first, Paul, if you could just give us a brief rundown of what you're planning to do there with that property.
All right, you want him to come up front, Barbara?
Yeah, why don't you, if you want to come up to one of the chairs, Paul, because that way we can, everybody, the people on at home can hear you.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah, you get the one of the king chairs. Huh?
Yes, we're trying to subdivide 2.5 acre into 2 lots. Is it 2.5? What was that?
Should be on there, Jerry. It should say like.
Yeah, I'm looking for the total amount.
2.67 parcel.
2.67.
2.67 parcel with 2 houses on it, and we want to divide it into 2 lots, each with their own existing driveway and own septic, and they do have a shared well.
Okay. All right, seems pretty straightforward. Do you need any other permitting at this point?
I don't believe so.
Okay, I'm going to turn it.
I'm just asking. It's all existing items, as by the looks.
Existing driveway, existing septics.
Yeah. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill to kind of lead the discussion from here on out, because neither Dana nor I have seen the plat. Howard, I think, has had a look at it. But
Howard picked up a copy today.
Yeah, we dropped off 6 of them last week.
Yeah.
That's
a couple
great.
of more 6 that couldn't get in to get them. So, in looking at it, Jim, Jerry, and Howard all have copies in front of them. So everything looked to be that it was there. We have the title. So Jerry and Jim, you guys want to go through and make sure we're and Howard too, we're got everything on here. But we have the title. We have the municipality. We have the name and address of the owner and the professional credentials of the preparer. Boundaries are present. The scale is present. Yep.
Yep.
There's no zoning. Proposed subdivision lines are there. Streets are there. Buildings are there. They're asking for a waiver on water courses, which I think is pretty common. Utility easements present. That Alpine Pipeline, or is that private?
That's private. The
Okay.
Alpine Pipeline
Across the
doesn't,
street.
yeah.
No, I don't, I think that, isn't the Alpine Pipeline, I thought was on this side of the road from the last,
It is, I thought it was stubbed out on that right away.
I think that the houses might be private, but I
Yeah,
think from the last subdivision of the Alpine,
Okay. Because there's a manhole across the street also. But okay, but the sewer connections on site, so but they are shown on there.
shown, and the backups are shown too.
Water supply is shown. They're asking for a waiver on drainage systems and connections to municipal, which would be appropriate. We don't have any. Parks or open spaces, other essential features, asking for a waiver on trees.
Can you back up for 1 second, Bill?
Sure. Yeah.
On 17, I didn't see anything checked. So that should be circled as a waiver on my
Waiver.
copy.
Yeah. Other essential features existing and proposed, because there are no other ones. So
Right.
that would be a waiver.
That's a waiver. Okay. Just want to get it right.
19 should be a yes, with the exception of the things that are waived.
Right.
And then there's a waiver for contour lines and proposed grading streets, highways, and sidewalks. So 20 and 21 are waivers requested. 22 is a yes, it has private sewage. And then waivers for 23, 24. So did we need to go into any reasons? 25 is asking if we need the reasons for that.
It seemed to be pretty self-explanatory.
I think so.
We don't require culverts. I just don't remember. That's number 23.
That's preliminary designs if they're required, but they're using existing driveways, so there's not going to be anything required because
Not
they are
applicable.
already
Right.
in place.
Yep, got it. I wrote that question down before he mentioned the driveways, and I didn't retain that. Thank you.
And then we have that list, Bill, 1 through 8 on the other side of the application.
That's oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the pre-qualifying ones too. Yeah. Boundaries and areas of contiguous property owner. I think everything's there. Boundaries and area of property subdivided was there. Subdivision lines are there. Prepare information is there. The scale is there. Existing features. Everything looks to be there. Yep. There's no improvements. So it is a yes, because there's no improvements, and the location map is on there also. So all of the things on the cover form 1, are.
Yeah, 7 is not applicable, right?
Yeah, 7 is satisfactory. So the answer is satisfactory, or yeah, is it satisfactory? Yes or no? So it would be satisfactory because there's nothing to actually need.
Okay.
Okay. And this is a minor subdivision. Paul, we normally, we need a public hearing for this. So we can do that in 3 weeks' time, or the 3 weeks after that. 3 weeks would be April 18th, be a Thursday evening again. If
Yes, that's good for me. The sooner the better.
okay.
Roll. Anybody?
Yeah, it's 18.
Okay, any other questions of Paul or Bill on the application?
So you would need to take action if the preliminary plat meets all requirements. That's an action. We have that as an actionable thing.
Okay.
And Barbara, we go over Form 3 next time. Is that correct?
Three is only for major.
Oh,
We
major,
don't need
that one. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, next time it would be just, I mean, if the final plat is ready, fine, but you have 90 days from approval to get that, Paul. The hearing is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to tell him that that's like the final plat that
The recordable
Mark
one.
Corsell would.
Yeah, the Mylar.
But you have 90 days. You don't have to have it with you unless he has it done, right?
Yeah.
He could have it done. There's nothing in this one we're going to change. So,
Yeah.
So I can have him have it done in 3 weeks.
if he has it done in 3 weeks,
Yeah.
So if he has it done in 3 weeks, you can bring it in, and they can stamp it and sign it, and then it'll get recorded.
Okay.
So we can do if you want to plan for that, we can.
Yes, we plan for that.
So there's the application fee, and then there's a recording fee. I forget what I don't have the recording fee because it usually does that in the other office, but I can get that for you.
Okay.
I can send it to you, but yeah, you can. So we would need leave the application fee tonight because we got to do the warning, send that out, and then when you come in 3 weeks, bring this. It'll be a recording fee. It's like I think it's like $25 or $35. So it's not.
I'm gonna check in.
Yeah.
In 3 weeks with that.
Yeah, the check in 3 weeks will be for the recording.
Yeah.
If you're bringing in the Mylar, bring that at the same time.
Okay.
And
Well,
then we can do it all at once.
Mark prepares that.
Yep. Yep.
okay.
Yeah, and basically in 3 weeks, Paul, it's a public hearing for anyone, joining landowners or anyone in town can come and comment. We usually don't get too many.
And if it goes fine, then it'll be approved in 3 weeks.
It should. That's a good possibility.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I just have a couple. Have you discussed this with the adjoining property owners around you?
I just spoke with the one owner that I bought the property from right away next to me.
It might be a good idea to let them know what you're up to here.
Okay.
That it's not a serious thing, but if you don't speak with them, they won't know.
Yes.
And also, it would be helpful in case you do this again to list the abutters owners on the.
I think it's on there.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is, Jim.
Yeah, it's 4 hours LOC on that one side,
Okay.
and then on the other side, it's Morrow House, and they go all the way around, and we're the third abutter. We own the front house.
Okay.
So we have all three written down here.
Actually, I have the list from the last time this was done, and so I just need to shorten it up a little bit.
Okay.
It's actually pretty easy this time.
We have 930 Route 4 LEC, and then Morrow House.
Yep. All right. That's all I have.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else?
Looks good.
It's got the Howard stamp of approval.
No, looks fine to me.
Is there a motion to accept this application as filled out and received by us, or whatever the language should be here?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? Oh, do we want to add as part of the motion that the hearing will be April 18th?
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Any other discussion? Ready for the vote. All those in favor of the motion in the April 18th public hearing, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. We'll see you in 3 weeks, Paul.
Okay, we thank you very much.
So as far as the other, he can bring that in tomorrow. There, didn't even need a check tonight, or is it tomorrow? Okay.
As long as we get it before, as long as we receive the fee before we vote.
I just didn't want to miss
before we sign it. Right. No, we were in the past. So as long as we receive the payment before we sign the thing, we're good. I'm happy. Okay. So I will, I'll send out the letters and do the things. Yeah, there's only a few butters for that one. That one's not a big list.
Are you muted, Barb? Barb, are you muted?
No, she's not.
She's not, but I mean,
Her sound went away. This happened at a board meeting the other night. She had to disconnect and reconnect.
Is there somebody coming in for that? Is just a?
I don't know. Just coming back. That's better.
Okay. You know, I figured out what that is. It's a Bluetooth device in the household that cancels me out for some reason.
Interesting.
Kind of weird.
Fighting back.
So we're good, right?
Yep, you're all set. We can hear you.
Okay, so Logan should be joining us in a few minutes. I told him around 7. He was going to try to hop on early, so he should be popping on anytime for the housing survey discussion. Going down to the river corridor, the letter.
Oh, you're gone again, Barbara.
he goes.
That's bad.
Hey, you sure? That one.
Technology.
Technical difficulties. Please stand by. Should have did it before I came. No, back.
Okay, how's this? Is this better
Yes.
Sir.
for the time being? Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
So the river corridor letters, they are ready. However, there is a bill in the Senate that may, if it passes, may require river corridors statewide. So it's only gone through the Senate. It still has to get House passage. So we're not quite sure, but I was going to suggest we kind of just wait and see the results of that legislation. It's 213, S213 or 231. I forget right now, but I can get that to folks if you want to see that bill in action. So, if that passes, it would influence the ordinance and maybe make our job a little bit different because it would be something in the regulations. It would take a couple years for it to get through the rulemaking process and all of that kind of stuff. So, we may decide to wait for all that process, or we may decide to go ahead with this ordinance, or whatever we decide.
Okay.
Still don't see Logan.
Do the minutes?
Well, we can now. Norm's here.
When Andres was at the board meeting on Tuesday, he was also talking about stormwater rules, and the state has made changes to their rules, and those changes are going to require us to do some amendments to our stormwater ordinance.
Oh.
So there's some things that are getting easier to manage. So there's some changes that are being made. So he's going to get to me what that's going to look like. But we are going to have an amendment to our stormwater ordinance coming.
And that will have to go through the whole process, planning commission
process, yeah.
Public hearings, select board public hearing.
Very likely.
Okay. Anything else at the select board meeting, Bill? I missed that one.
Not anything major. That was the most notable thing that we have a grant that we received for them to do stormwater design work, which is but he's also got to do this for us because we got to roll this into our MS4 permit. So there's a lot of stormwater stuff happening.
Okay. Well, let's move down to the minutes of March 7th.
Excuse me a second. I'm having trouble seeing the select board. Is it only the four of us present?
There are five of us now. There are six of us total. Yeah, 6.
Logan's coming on.
Okay,
Okay.
In the select board boardroom, both Jim Hall and Jerry are present. Norm.
Okay. I can't see their face. I see Jim and Jerry. Okay. Now I do. Okay.
Okay. Well, we'll do the minutes in a second. Let's let Logan sign in here. And
hello, everyone.
Good evening.
There you are.
Good evening.
Good timing, Logan.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, we just finished up on the subdivision stuff.
Great.
So, let you catch your breath just for a second, and we'll dive into the housing survey that you put together. You collected data on, and you had 77 responses, some of those from non-Rutland town people. And why don't you just take it away from here on what else you found?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much to the Planning Commission and the town in general for, letting us do this survey. This is something we're hoping to replicate in other communities, and really appreciative that you guys were the first one to take up this offer. And it really, to me, kind of shows the value of this survey. I'll kind of just Yeah, I'll kind of just walk through the survey broadly and then just kind of give, my interpretation of the significant findings and the suggested sites in different parts of this report. Um, the first thing I think I want to start off with is, the surveys doesn't represent, everybody in Rutland town, right? So, it's approximately using the decimal census and considering, assuming that everyone who said they were a resident of Rutland town actually is a resident. It's about 1.7%. So I think it's important to note, the value of this survey is the qualitative element, hearing from people, getting their input. And you have to kind of balance that with, the sample size, that it's not, of course, everybody. Yeah, I thought the first question was about, are you a resident? And the second question was, how important is building new housing in Rutland town? And I think, the value of that question is kind of twofold. One is, if you're kind of taking the survey and assuming it's representative of the town, I think it kind of gives you a rough sense of, that most people think building new housing in some form or fashion is at least somewhat important or very important. On the flip side, I think this also could be used to say, this is only 1.7% of the town, roughly. And so this also kind of speaks to the views of that 1.7%, so that, most of them are, want to see housing being built in some form or fashion. So that question could kind of be interpreted in multiple ways. Kind of depends on how you view the survey. The next question was about fair market rents in Rutland County. And maybe actually, if anything I say, jumps out a question, you by all means just cut me off and ask the question, by the way. Yeah, so the next question was about fair market rents. And this, fair market rents is an indicator that's only done on a countywide basis. So it's a little bit skewed, right? Because it's considering all of Rutland County. Granted, Rutland Town is one of the bigger municipalities in the region. So yeah, and this response to me kind of showed that there's a general want for a distribution of housing prices, both below fair market rent, at fair market rent, above fair market rent. But there's also, in my opinion, kind of looking at some of the questions that have to do with the price of housing. Definitely a general sentiment of, having housing priced for people currently living in the community. I see there's a hand raised.
Yeah, Logan, before you go too far in question number, well, I guess it's number 3. Can you go back to the previous question? I just had a statistical observation and I just wanted to verify it with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the first question, how important is building new housing in Rutland Town? Can I assume that the reason that the data show the same numbers is because the people who were not residents didn't answer that question?
No, it's just that the distribution. So I think it was about, let's see what it is. So there were 77 total responses. 12 of them were non-residents.
Oh my.
The 12 people that were not residents, their distribution was exactly the same as about 80% of non-residents. The sentiment was the same whether there were residents or were not residents.
Okay, so it didn't change the statistics.
Right. Yeah, and for the fair market rents, the numbers were. Oh no, the fair market rents were different, but when you look at the pie charts, they seem very similar. And I wanted to kind of differentiate that for you, just so you could kind of see if there were changes between residents and non-residents.
Thank you.
That's great question though. Any other questions? Alrighty, I'll keep moving along. So yeah, that was question 3 was what I was talking about with the fair market rents, and just that there's a general want for a diversity of housing prices. Question 4, I think, was where this starts to get a little bit tricky, and I think also some of the graphs, I think there's a little bit of nuance here. So question 4 was about housing types that were supported in Rutland Town. And so the green bars, very broadly, I was trying to just keep this simple, was that, are generally supported. So I looked into it, and according to the 2021 census data, 74% of homes in Rutland town are single family homes or single family detached homes. So that doesn't factor in like townhouses, things like that. But basically 3 out of every 4 homes, if in Rutland town, are single family homes. So it wasn't too surprising that that was the one that kind of stood out. But there is definitely, kind of zooming in here, and these graphs are kind of tiny. I tried to fit it all on one page, but duplexes, fourplexes, courtyards, cottage courts, definitely townhouses, all of those, it seemed like there was general sentiment of supporting those. The live work was really interesting to me, where it seemed like people who chose the live work option, which is marked on that page in red, those people almost exclusively chose live work and didn't choose any other options. And in their responses, they went on to explain that they wanted those sites, those housing types, where typically commercial sites are. So kind of where you would have, typical commercial structures, but also having the, first floor be, a commercial establishment of some kind, and then having a residence on the second or third floor, if however many floors. And then here I thought was also where there was a little bit more difference between Rutland town residents and non-Rutland town residents, where I kind of just broadly looking at it, it seemed like Rutland town residents were more likely to support single family homes and townhouses. And then the other category and no preference are in yellow. So I think there's also a subset of people who frankly just want more housing, and their preferences don't really doesn't really matter to them. And then on the flip side, I think there are people that really want the planning commission to be very, the town to be very diligent about this in terms of using, about sprawl and using existing structures and trying to find attachments to existing structures or accessory dwelling units. And that some people also just frankly said that they didn't want to answer the question because Rutland town, there's just so much diversity by location that they didn't really feel appropriate answering specific housing types, which kind of speaks to, some flaws to this question as well. Just kind of want to caveat that. That's question 4. Question 5 of the report. Oh, go ahead.
Yep, excuse me. When you said diversity, you're talking about diversity of population or diversity of housing?
Yeah, the diversity. Yeah, that's a great question. The diversity of the buildings themselves. So yeah, just the variety of housing types.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Logan, were you surprised that the numbers for townhouses were higher than some of the other multiple unit dwellings?
Yeah, I was personally, and that's something I'd wonder. I'm familiar to a degree, but I'm not sure how popular townhouses are presently in Rutland town. So yeah, that was kind of why I was wondering. Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I thought I was surprised because I frankly, I grew up actually in a townhouse. So to me, I thought it is interesting because I've had that experience, but not something I think of when I think of housing in Vermont. So interesting kind of dynamic there. Yeah, question 5 was, about, the RRPC and, helping the town. And I wanted to kind of phrase this in 2 different ways, which is that first you want, the RRPC's help, and there was no specifically that like we don't want housing help because we don't want more housing built in town. And I wanted, that flagged so people could specifically voice that opinion if they had it. But also, there are some people, there was a sentiment that I think is pretty clear in this survey too, is that there isn't necessarily that people want help in identifying sites, but they also really want help with specific sites that are already identified. And to be blunt, they're referring to the Diamond Run Mall. Like all the responses that answered, we want housing help, but we have sites we've already identified. All those responses then went on to elaborate and say the Diamond Run Mall was the site we want help with. But most people want the town to take up this opportunity in terms of both identifying new sites and, you know, working with existing sites. Yeah, and you know, maybe is also a good point there, right? So some people are kind of not 100% sure what the opportunity is, but even when you take out the maybes, it's still a majority of the survey.
The owner of the Diamond Run Mall property is coming back to discuss with the board on April 23rd his progress. So I get a lot of phone calls about that as well, and have to clarify that the mall is not is not town property. So
right. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I didn't even realize that there might not be that understanding. The next one was this map. This would have been, I think, let's see, would have been this. Yeah, this question, how this map ended up forming was the question was about vacant properties, and you know, this ended up being kind of lumped into some people just talking about sites they wanted to see housing, and some of it did have to talk about vacant properties to a degree. I think what's really important here to note is that you know, there were, I want to say, somewhere around 20 plus parcels that were identified, and two areas broadly, and that's represented by circles in these maps. And what I think was, you know, interesting going back to the Diamond Run Mall was, you know, how only all of these parcels mapped, except for the Diamond Run Mall, it was only a couple people mentioning these sites. And then the Diamond Run Mall was, you know, 4 out of every 10 people, basically, that mentioned that. So, it was, you know, I don't know how surprising that really is, but and I think, you know, when I'm looking at this, why I ended up going with the town's future land use map is, you know, that's something where the town's already kind of looked at, you know, where different areas of town, where they want the future of that land, and I think it's kind of interesting looking at some of these clusters of parcels. So, you know, south of Rutland City, that cluster there, I think is largely commercial and working lands. And I know over there, I think in both of those cases, there's some wetlands and some flood hazards there, which definitely makes developing that a little bit tricky. North of Rutland City, kind of straight north, I think it's a mix of commercial, and then as you keep going north, I think it switches more to working lands. And I think I think there's a question there of, and this is something I think is a lot of towns are wondering is areas that are have been kind of considered like lands that want to be commercial. Do we want to keep those lands commercial? Should that kind of switch more to housing? I think that's a conversation to potentially have, you know, and yeah, so, you know, I think different parcels, there's different considerations. And I think part of this could be looking at, you know, I could kind of go and look at on all these parcels and see how many of these are constrained by steep slopes or wetlands or a lot of the things that could emerge in the permitting process. That's an opportunity to kind of see the feasibility of these sites. Yeah, Barbara?
Yeah, the circled areas, Route 4 East and Business Route 4. Are you saying that 4 or less people suggested those circled areas?
Yeah, so the circled areas, no, so the circles were more, I think it was 2 people for each circle, basically just broadly characterized that area. And, you know, they were blunt. They were like, I don't know where, but it would be great if there was some housing there. And that was kind of the degree, because I specifically made the survey verbiage broad because some people got really specific and gave me, you know, the parcel ID. Some people, it was like the parcel next to here, you know, and it was enough. And some people though kept it very broad, this street, this neighborhood, that sort of thing. And so that's how the circles emerged. But yeah, both the circles and the highlighted parcels in yellow, all of those except the Diamond Run Mall were mentioned 4 or less times. And I believe I could go and look back, but I could probably identify for you, you know, the ones that were mentioned like 3 or 4 times versus the ones that were mentioned once or twice, if that would be helpful.
That'd be in the spreadsheet you gave us, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a matter of, kind of playing with the data and yeah. Is there any more questions on the map or the sites or anything like that? Great. The last question is, I think, out of this report, I think the last question, what I wrote there is really tough to go and take, 40 or so there were 70 something responses. This was an optional question, and I think more than half of people used this opportunity to say something. And so, I originally was going to provide all the responses, and then, you put that on a piece of paper and you realize it's very overwhelming for anyone reading it. So I did try to cull it down, but this is kind of my broad takeaways, which was, lots of people talking about the price of housing and the need for housing price for people in town to afford it. Definitely just the sentiment that there's little building going on and that just like it would be great for more housing to come online. Definitely, though, also a sentiment about not wanting to promote sprawl and finding ways to do that, whether it's using existing buildings or infrastructure or, building accessory dwelling units. There was also, and there was a really good comment that sticks out to me when I think of this one, but there were definitely people also talking about not wanting to ruin Rutland Town's character. And, about it being important that there aren't cookie cutter housing types and that, someone said something along the lines of like Rutland towns where you want to get away from the hustle and bustle, but you still want to be like somewhat near, things you need. And I thought that was, an important sentiment. Something to me that I think was pretty surprising and significant that emerged a couple times was people saying that there should be a focus on Rutland City, which I think there is to a degree already, but that, if there's opportunities for the town to collaborate with the city to build housing in the city because it directly, benefits Rutland Town, that's something that the town should look into, which wasn't something that came to my mind, but this sort of collaborative nature is part of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. So I thought that was great. And yeah, also sentiments just about, certain amenities to draw young families and, the want to draw young families and what that requires. And, kind of the importance like recreation being tied to that. And then there was also just a sentiment that the housing stock's being converted to Airbnbs. And what's interesting to me is the state has data on Airbnbs that they get from a third party, this data analytics company. So I did look into this. Rutland Town, because there's Rutland Town and Rutland City, and then there's like Rutland, the data gets really, the state's data, I think, is wrong. So like the state basically says there's like 0 Airbnbs in Rutland Town. And I think that's just because of how this website goes about categorizing homes in Rutland City and Rutland Town. So I had an Airbnb account and poked around and it seemed like it was more than 0, but I think it's hard to say exactly what, to what degree. And maybe there are other data sets. Yeah, Barbara.
Yeah, we just passed the short-term rental ordinance.
Oh, right.
The
Yeah.
Planning Commission and the Select Board. It hasn't gone into effect yet. It's a few more weeks away. But Bill's been keeping tabs on that, and there's probably closer to 20, 25 short-term rentals.
About 30. So I reached back out to the vendor that may help us source the ones specifically in town, and his count right now is about 31.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so, Logan, most of these comments about Airbnbs, were they across the board? Like, it's okay that this is part of the mix or not okay?
I got more of the sentiment that, and this is, I always find this kind of an interesting dynamic, just, Rutland County being, broadly as a county, there's definitely, seasonal interest. But to me, it seemed more that Airbnbs are constraining the year-round housing supply and that, the present year-round housing supply is being converted. And this is something that is, occurring across the country with websites like Airbnb rising. It's not unique to Rutland County or Rutland Town or Vermont for that matter. So yeah, I think that's sort of the sentiment more that I got. the individual comments I put here were ones that I just thought kind of, were worth considering, which was that, Rutland Town, doesn't have zoning, and so there's, appreciation for that. There was actually one comment though that I think wanted zoning, and it was an interesting dynamic there, but it was more people saying don't create zoning, or like continue to not have zoning. Another idea was that if the fire police department has a vacant property list, that was something I hadn't thought of. But that was in response. Gotcha. That's a quick answer. Thank you. Yeah, so that checks off that one. Just the idea that neighbors should work together. And there's sometimes often, and when building housing, sometimes it's neighbors end up kind of opposing each other or disagreeing. But if there's a way for neighbors to work together, I'm not really sure how the town would facilitate that. But there was, a need for more pet-friendly housing. Someone mentioned that they can't hire employees because of housing. And then there were just some questions. Can Rutland Town handle more people? Can Rutland Town ensure developers meet the town's needs? And this is just kind of broad. There are definitely other comments, if you go through that Excel spreadsheet I provided in addition. And then the last point here is just, the last thing I'll mention here is just that, the survey is done through our Housing Resource Navigator program, and we've put together a housing resource guide. And this is really kind of what we're calling a one-stop shop for anyone that's looking to build housing or do any home improvements. So it has all these different quote unquote resources, really, really opportunities that can kind of help, landowners make these improvements, build housing if they'd like, and includes like project management support, all these different databases that are kind of helpful, guidebooks. There's also funding resources that can kind of help lower development costs. So development costs in Vermont are rising really, really quickly. So this is becoming increasingly important to kind of get these variety of funding streams if landowners want to make certain improvements. And there's also just a list of helpful things so that people know what regulations and requirements they have to go through depending on what project they're working on. So I'll just plug this that we are planning on, kind of having a flyer posted in parts of Rutland Town and across the region that just kind of promote this guide. And it's, it's a free online guide. So that's something that the RRPC plans to do in Rutland Town. And I just threw that in on the last page as well of this survey, if anyone's interested. Yeah, that's any other questions? I'm trying to think. I guess the big, first, if there are any other questions. So I guess the large takeaway is really
Logan. I think Norm has a question.
Oh, yeah. Go for it.
Thank you. First, thank you for your work here. It's a good place to start. The question I had relates to some statistics you gave way back in the beginning. I think you said there were 77 responses and 15 of them were from non-residents. Was that correct?
Yeah. Or 77, so it's 84% of survey responses identified as Rutland Town residents.
When I divided, maybe I did the wrong thing. 15 over 77, I got 15% were not. So I guess that's 85. You're right. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Given that the participation was so minimal,
right,
in terms of absolute numbers, how valuable do you, as somebody that does this every day, view this?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's something I think shouldn't be considered in isolation, right? This is 1.7% of the town's population, roughly. It's something that I think it has some weight, but I don't think it's something that has all the weight, I guess, is what I would say. So one thing to me that I think is worth thinking about in terms of like other statistics, which is like, so basically the short answer to your question, which is that this should be considered, but it should also be considered with, the larger context of the town, both in terms of, other meetings that go on, other conversations you all are having, and the larger, I guess, like data context of the town. Roughly 3 out of every 4 homes in Rutland Town are single family detached homes. I also found that 71% of households in Rutland Town in 2020 had 1 or 2 people, but roughly one, I got this data point here too. 1,229 homes, at least in 2021, apparently have 3 or more bedrooms. So, most households, 1 or 2 people, most homes, 3+ bedrooms. So that data point in and of itself, regardless of the survey, speaks to me of, encouraging taking these big single family homes that have too many bedrooms and, splitting them into a duplex so that two households that are, like the average Rutland Town household could live in them. That to me, and that also kind of speaks to the sentiment of not wanting to encourage sprawl, wanting to keep the character, the rural character the same. So I think it's that's an example, I think, where it's like you take the context of the town, the conversations you're having, the work you're doing as a planning commission, you take this survey and give it the weight you think it could be worth, and then you consider the data and how the trends are changing both in Rutland Town and Rutland County and Vermont and the U.S. in general, because a lot of these trends are also a symptom of national trends. So it's I don't know how great of an answer that was, but
I hate to exercise my rather rusty lawyer skills because I've been retired for 5 years, but I can't resist asking a follow-up question.
Yeah.
And that is, you said something about a significant number of the households in Rutland Town had 1 or 2 occupants, but the households were 3 or more bedrooms.
Yeah, the homes themselves. So like the actual nature of the present housing stock are single family homes that largely have 3 or more bedrooms.
And
there's that sort of mix match.
And 1 or 2 occupants.
Right. Yeah.
So my question is, does that indicate a decrease in the population of Rutland Town?
Yeah, no, I think my general sense, and this is across Rutland County, this phenomena is pretty much ubiquitous in all of Rutland County, which is that you have families in a single family home that have and I actually didn't check this number, so I don't know 100% this is true for Rutland Town, but I do know it's true for Rutland County, which is that population is not necessarily shrinking, but what's happening is that you have families, still families, but the children are of an older age, and so they move out of the house, but they might not necessarily move out of the house like they move super far away. They might just get their own place. They're just old enough. And so what we're noticing on a countywide scale, and I could check this for you in terms of Rutland Town specifically, is that the population on a broad scale countywide is roughly the same, but the number of households are increasing, and the average or median household size is shrinking. And so we're seeing more 1 or 2 person households, but we're seeing more households in roughly the same people. Does that make sense?
Sort of.
Yeah.
It's helpful. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to take up so much time, but
no, these are great questions.
Any questions there in the office, town office? Logan, if we were to come up, if we were going to take this a step further and maybe come up with a list of sites that we thought would be appropriate, what would you do with that? What would be your next steps? Yeah,
so mainly, essentially what we're doing is through a variety of methods, one being the survey where, kind of gauging residents' opinions. But essentially what we're doing is we're identifying sites. We're working with the landowner saying, hey, for X, Y, and Z reasons, we think this site would be great for housing. And if the landowners are interested, we're trying to reach out to developers and essentially trying to get some sort of agreement in hopes that the developers will be, building housing that fits the wants and needs of the community. And so essentially, by doing this on a countywide scale, we're getting sites in different towns. It makes it easier for us to go and talk to developers of varying, scales in terms of scales and expertise. So some of them, are very, very small, and some of them are we will be reaching out to some of these larger Vermont and northern New England and New England developers and trying to get a sense of if their interest in the region. And then, having these sites and having this information is kind of useful so that when, if they are interested, we actually have sites and landowners interested and on board. And I am aware that the sites south of Rutland City on Route 7, that cluster, that I think it's technically 3 parcels, but basically that cluster, all those landowners are aware. And I think definitely the southernmost parcel is on the market currently. So I just want to flag that. And that kind of goes back to, some of these sites are just people's random ideas. And then some of these are a lot more thought out by residents who actually are like, no, I went online and I saw that this specific site is on the market. And it has been on the market for, however long. And I'll mention, this is one thing I didn't mention, and I'm actually not sure if this person, could go back and check if this person checked off they were a resident in Rutland town, but I did speak with one person who is, has just kind of broadly interested in, building housing and really she's formerly homeless. So she's also wants to address, issues with homelessness as well. And so she had some information too, because she was constantly checking and seeing what was and wasn't on the market. So I just wanted to flag that as well. And that was the one phone call that was mentioned in that report. So that would be the next step, though.
Dana.
So Logan, I heard you say a couple of things and it was gelling in my mind. You mentioned reconsidering how we use our existing housing stock and converting multi or single family dwellings that are oversized for the residents. You were talking about 1,200 properties that had 3+ bedrooms, but only a large majority of those only had 1 or 2 residents. And you're talking about, we are talking about generally statewide, a housing shortage. I'm wondering if we can reframe the question as not about a housing shortage so much as a housing deployment. And what I mean by that is that the houses that seem to jump out in your report indicate that their capacity is seriously underutilized. And so maybe a conversation could be held or an exploration could be held around how to address that particular phenomenon or that particular set of data points. What could we do? In that same line, if we're looking at people in budgets and helping them to maximize their value for the dollar, it is always easier to share, multiple renters sharing a larger home where you could have 4 or 5 people if they all have a bedroom more easily than if each person is going out and renting their own efficiency apartment.
Right.
I mean, that might be a shift in the type of living situations, but I know that other countries explore that, and maybe even on the West Coast, there are co-rental arrangements where there's a communal space and then everybody has an individual private space. So I mean, I don't know, is that something that we're interested in pursuing? Is that something that might be beneficial to younger families? Maybe 2 families could share a house. or something,
Yeah.
or maybe it could be a duplex and they have a common area. I have no idea.
Right.
I know actually up in Quebec they were exploring some of this as well. So maybe that's something we can put on the intermediate term agenda for looking at and surveying people about their feelings and how and what that might look like. And then we might have property owners to say, oh, you know what? I could downsize. I can take a townhouse that's half the size of my house instead of having, I don't know, 1,900 square feet. I can go down to 1,200 square feet or something like that. I'm making this up, but that way there would be interest in selling the property, buying something, downsizing as people are aging, and if they can live in a smaller space, then perhaps that frees that up to be renovated.
Yeah.
And then that might fit into that woman's vision of what Rutland Town could be in terms of having more housing stock to address needs of people who are homeless for whatever reason. I mean, the biggest reason that people might not be able to afford a home is because of the cost for an individual or small number of people to get a rental or buy.
There are a few things there that I think kind of speak to your point too, which is that one, what you're talking about is definitely a rising trend. I'm not 100% sure about Rutland County, but definitely in Vermont, in the U.S. Generally, with this sort of more people living together. There's also interesting trend of multi-generational, where you have someone who has a single family home. Their kids have moved out, and they have this big home, but they love their home. They've been there for decades. Why move the place that you have all these memories? But on the flip side, you have a big home that you have to take care of. You might have a big lawn, etc. And then there are young people who are looking for a housing. So there's this interesting dynamic happening where there are young people coming in living someone like myself in their 20s, who might not be able to afford a home, would sort of want that feel. And it helps the person who's an older adult, and they can do some of the more manual labor. They can take out the trash, things like that. And so I think your point is spot on. And I would say sort of to your first question about how can we sort of encourage that? That's sort of a big part of the housing resource guide I mentioned, and giving those sorts of what is needed, if landowners are interested in taking those steps. But that's something we've been thinking about too, is trying to understand to what degree people are willing to do that sort of home sharing and multi-generational living. And what is the role of both us as the RPC and the towns to do that? I know there are basically, like, we're just kind of hard to understand, like, or towns and the Rutland Regional Planning Commission, is that something like, is it our role to promote that? Or is it more, I think that's something that you bring up that we're personally not, something we've been talking about in the office, I guess, me and my boss, about what that role is. So yeah, it's a great point though. And there are websites that do exist, where people go, and I'm not sure what they're called. This is something I learned about when I started this job. So I'd never even heard of this idea, but there definitely are websites that exist. I don't know how popular they are in the region, where there are home sharing sites where you could go and say, hey, I have this property at this place, and I'm looking for someone to live with me, and I'm pretty sure it has all these dynamics of a contract and things like that. That's all built into the software. Yeah, great point.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Logan?
I have a comment. Has your work taken you into any historical research of what went on here, say 50, 60 years ago in the town and the city area?
Yeah, I've looked at not specific to Rutland town. So I guess the short answer would be no. I've definitely looked at kind of sub-regional population trends, I guess. But I haven't necessarily went town by town and looked. I do know kind of broadly what happened, but I think you're getting at a good point here, which is history matters.
You really need to look at it, particularly in the industrial scope, as town and city. I'm thinking in particular how Richardson Scales went out of here about 60 years ago. Mal Tool went out. More business forms went out. Tam brands went out. And there's Metro Mail went out. And most of these were good paying jobs at the time. And some of these operations were in the town, some were in the city. And people worked back and forth to, in other words, Rutland town people would go into the city to work, and some of the city people would come into the town to work. And because those businesses and those industrial operations have left, you've got housing. For instance, over in center Rutland, where I live, there's a lot of houses up that street that were built by Vermont Marble Company. Well, Vermont Marble Company has been gone for eons.
Right.
And you really got to take a look at these things to get an answer. And there's a reason why everything happens. Sometimes it's pretty hard to come to a conclusion, but there is a reason.
Yeah.
And I think if you're going to make some major recommendations and recommendations and ideas to the city and the town and the county, for that matter, you ought to know what the historical events have been that brought the town or the municipality to where it is today.
Right. No, I think you're definitely right there. And sort of speaks to that sort of interrelated nature between jobs and housing, right? So once, as you put it, once they're all gone, right, there's then there's that sort of housing dynamic there. I think it's definitely a good point too about thinking about where we're viewing the economic trends in Rutland town, and how that is inherently linked to how much housing or how little housing is needed. Yeah, but I think you're right. There's definitely more to look at there to really get a better understanding.
Any other comments or questions? Jerry, you're very small on my screen, so I can't see.
Very small in general.
Anything else?
I just want to say thanks to Logan for presenting the information in a way that we could discuss it and understand the nature of the survey and the type of responses, and get a glimpse into the importance given by those who responded. And as with any survey, I mean, it would have been nice to have a slightly larger sample, but it does represent in some way the interest of the town as a whole. And so I just want to say thanks for doing that for us. And you had great graphics, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, Logan, you can stick around and watch some sausage making if you want as we hash this out, or you can call it a day.
I might stick around. Sure.
Okay.
Then you're going to give the true picture of what we do to the regional commission, and not the colored one that Barbara delivers, right?
No.
Yeah, he's here to verify.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you.
Oh yeah.
Where are we on the agenda now?
I'm sorry, Dana?
Where are we on the agenda now?
Well, we're on the discussion part of the housing survey, and what we want to do next. I was thinking, don't know what the rest of the group thinks about this, but and I don't know what you think about this, Dana, but do you and I want to get together and maybe come up with some proposals to bring to our next meeting?
Happy to join you if that's what you'd like.
How does it sound to others?
If we are going to do that, I would ask for a very brief brainstorm so that we have some direction from the rest of the group. So if we could take 2 minutes even just to get down some ideas of what people are thinking, that would be helpful for me.
Yeah, good idea.
My sense is that we have a lot of data to absorb here, and I'm not sure I have very many thoughts. I think I'm concerned with the size of the sample, as I expressed before, but I don't have a sense of a grip on any specific thing that this tells me. It's just my sense. So I don't think I can be of any help in that.
Okay, well, let's just go around the horn, get people's perspectives here. Howard, you're in the next Hollywood Square of my horn.
Yeah, I really don't have anything that I feel that I could add at this point, Barb. Discussion's been good, but I don't have any magic things to talk about.
Okay. Jim?
That's it.
Nothing more?
No.
Okay. Okay. Jerry? Anything?
No, I'm with Howard.
Okay, well, do we want to take a next step?
What do you have in mind for a next step?
Well, I thought, maybe a couple of us could look at the data a little more closely and see if there were some patterns we could pull out, or maybe make some decisions about where the Planning Commission can land on this in promoting certain sites or types of housing and such. That would be one alternative.
Well, the one thing that stands out, not necessarily from this survey, but from the history of several years of various forms of data and various undertakings that we have, or studies that we've participated in, is how does this fit into the concept of more concentrated housing, building a village center or a town center with town hall is sort of, or that area. That seems to me to be one thing that we talked about it, perhaps in terms of energy efficiency and cluster housing and closer to town and that kind of thing. And if maybe taking a look at it, at this data from that perspective, was that the scoping study we did? It was done for us at one time. It just always stuck out in my mind. I think you used the term village center in those discussions, and for some reason that stuck. And all that work we did several years ago and was done for us as well. Maybe trying to measure how this fits into some of that, and whether we can tie it together a little bit and into something of a clearer vision for the future or recommendations. Maybe one way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got.
Barbara, Jerry's got a question or a thought.
So I guess just comment without beating a big thing. I think Jim was pretty much spot on. What in the hell is drawing people with no jobs to Rutland Town? I mean, I'm sorry. I sit here and I listen to all this, and what we ought to be talking about is how we can actually get some jobs here. Then there might be a need for some housing. I mean, tell me what the need for housing is. Does anybody have a specific amount of people that are out there looking for housing right now? I mean, you got to have a reason to have people here. And I think we're all very fortunate that we live here. I love Vermont. I love to be here. I don't like the trend where it's going further and further and further away. And many people talk about this global warming. Where's Killington going to be in 20 years? I mean, that's about all we got here. So all these other businesses have been taken away with really little or no interest by the state of Vermont to increase that. I mean, the taxes go up, but for what? I would like to see the Planning Commission talk about, more often than not, talk about starting with building the structures that would get people here. And then we can talk about the structures to house them. I mean, I think development would happen if there were jobs. It would happen. There would be developers that would be interested. I can't imagine a developer right now wanting to put a bunch of there is no affordability in low-income housing unless the state's funding it. There's just, I work in this trade. It is, the building behind Jones's Donuts. I think it was part of, is that St. Peter's?
IHM, I think.
IHM, $329,000 a unit. That's what those cost. Who can afford that? The state of Vermont, maybe, because we all paid for them. But I just think that there's a lot of there's a lot of wishful thinking here, and I hope that it goes in a great direction. But I think we got to start with jobs. We got to start with those, and then all the infrastructure and all those other things are going to follow. And I think Jim brought up a great point about looking at the history. These houses were filled. My community where I live, mostly 60s, 70s houses where things were still a little bit on the rise. And those people are getting older now. And many of the people in the community are still there. They're still the original owners, but now it's filling up a little bit with people with kids and things because those people are either passing on or having to move away. But I'd like somebody to show me where you're going to get developers to spend this kind of money unless there's a lot of money behind them, because it's too damn expensive right now. But it would follow industry if there was something here.
So Jerry,
I sat here and kept my mouth shut, and I kind of finally bubbled over.
I knew it was coming, Jerry. Knew it was. Okay, Dana.
Thank you, Jerry.
Piggybacking on what Jerry said, one of the things that I was writing down to talk to you about, Barbara, was identifying the questions. So our task, yours and mine, perhaps, is just to identify those questions. Some of the questions that Jerry raised, and outlining them, and then talking about connecting to our partners in Rutland County on who represent business and industry, maybe the Department of Labor, and say, what is our demand for jobs? And who are we looking to have fill those jobs? Are we talking entry-level positions? Are we talking mid-career positions? What are we talking about? And then what are we talking about, and index that to housing? Because to Jerry's point, makes no difference if we're doing a housing plan with no target audience to actually serve. If we meld both the job market with the housing stock, then you have a coordinated approach to filling homes and filling jobs, which will create economic activity for the region and help bring in greater prosperity, which in turn will bring more interest in the area, more opportunity for growth, and more families to come in. So I think Jerry's got something there. But Barbara, I think our task is just to generate the questions. If you and I are going to sit down and do this as a subcommittee, we just generate whatever questions we can and identify the partners that we would want to explore these questions with.
Mm-hmm.
How's that sound?
It sounds, that makes a lot of sense. I'm just thinking, maybe we should include Mary Beth, as well, just to get a slightly younger demographic involved and a current family person. See if she'd be interested. But that makes a lot of sense, Dana. I guess I'll entertain a motion if we think we're ready to set 2 or 3 of us off on this task.
Okay, Barbara, I will make a motion to have the chair establish a subcommittee, an ad hoc subcommittee, to explore the question of next steps on the housing survey with interested members from the Planning Commission.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay, any other talk on this? Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion of the ad hoc subcommittee on housing, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any opposed? Okay. All right, we'll try to get something for the next meeting.
So Barbara, just as a point of clarification, since so many of us are on virtually tonight, was that a unanimous vote based on Bill's perspective, since he's the one who has to generate the minutes?
That was my interpretation.
Okay, that's what I thought, but in virtual space, who knows what you get?
It's harder to tell.
Okay. Good discussion. All right, we'll leave housing, and we just have one other item, unless anyone else has any announcements. We kind of touched on that earlier, but we can move down to the minutes of...
One thing, I was going to start working on kind of updating the subdivision application forms. Just the experience we've had over the last few, I don't think we're getting the information we want for a subdivision application, such as like how many parcels do you want when you're done, and how big are they, and those kinds of things. Because when you look at what the actual requirement is, we don't require the subdivision ordinance does not require a survey for an application. All it requires is, at its most basic, a sketch,
right,
which could be an issue. So I was going to look at updating the forms to kind of gather what we are actually wanting. The forms that we use now are based strictly on the carbon copies that used to be used at one point. I just turned them into digital forms, but there was no, I didn't do any editing. Just, it was a 3 or 4 part carbon copy, and that's what I used. So if anybody has things they would like to have on there that we can ask, send me a message, and I'll see if I can start including them on a new version.
Go ahead, Norm.
Bill's comments triggered something. Bill, did I understand you to say that a survey is not required? for subdivision?
The subdivision ordinance does not specifically say a survey is required and with the initial application.
Oh, with the initial application, but a survey is required before.
As a final plat, but we generally like to have a survey map as the beginning one, but we actually cannot require it because the ordinance does not require a survey in the initial application.
Would it make any sense to consider amending it to do so?
Amending the ordinance? We're already in the process of that.
Right, adding that to the, I don't recall whether that was something we discussed. I don't, of making a survey an initial requirement.
The ordinance, the submitted version to our town attorney has been with him for about 5 months now. And I don't know if we want to go and say, hold up, let's start over again. Because you're free to look. I think everybody had a copy at one point of what we sent on, but we cannot, the ordinance does not allow us to require a survey at the time of application.
Wow. I guess it's up to the chair to think of give some thought to whether, if we've waited 5 months and, we can't be, it apparently isn't going to upset the apple cart to submit 2 lines or something of that nature, if that'll do it.
Yeah, we kind of ran into this the last subdivision, the North Grove.
Yeah.
He said it doesn't. You can't require it, and he was absolutely correct. We could not tell him it was required.
Did anyone notice that was one of the sites for housing?
Oh yeah,
some of that property. Go ahead, Dana.
I'm seeing that we're in a kind of a catch-22, and it doesn't have a simple answer. I understand what Bill's saying, and I think that there's some logic to that, which is intuitively useful from my perspective. However, the catch is that if we change the regulations and require the survey first, and we decide that something else is needed that did not appear on the survey, then they would go back, and that would significantly increase their cost potentially.
And I'm thinking that's probably why it wasn't required to begin with, that a sketch plan was acceptable, because if they came to the commission said, you aren't going to do this, just no to the application, they could have spent a substantial amount of money to create a survey that was essentially worthless.
Exactly.
So
right.
I'm pretty sure that was the intention of why it not being singularly required at the onset.
So my question is there a way to navigate those, I'll call them competing interests, that would allow
a survey is preferred to be, a sketch plan or survey, which is preferred. We can change the wording on the application short of saying it's required, because it wouldn't. I don't think we should. I mean, just based upon that, you never know that somebody could try to do something that's not really allowed. So that can kind of get a substance to some detail wording, but I think we could say, like it's worded now, a sketch plan or survey, in parentheses preferred, can, to be provided, but it's not required.
Right, but that's not currently in there, correct?
The language dates back to the 80s on this application. This is not. There's really no updating.
Right, but what you're proposing right now is not currently in the existing language, right?
Correct.
So I mean, maybe that's the way to go, and this can be something that we.
I don't mean to make this a long conversation for tonight, but just if you have some thoughts about how we want to do that, but we do have to stick within the confines of what we actually can require.
Right.
We can say a survey is preferred, though.
Oh, we sure could, sure. And we can also, but I was thinking of, we talked about a while ago, but adding that we would like a digital copy of whatever they submit. So that way, we can reduce the paper files that we have to keep. And because a lot of these files, if we have them digitally, we don't need paper copies anymore. Like it's just taking up space. So.
Right. It would help the.
Yeah, I would support that.
Couldn't it be like a survey is preferred and will be required so that they know that they're going to need it anyway.
And I think that's what comes out of like this meeting tonight. How he brought a sketch plan. We're like, okay, then you need to bring us.
Right.
Then at the final hearing is when they bring a survey.
Right.
And that's why they get 90 days from then to bring a Mylar, because you brought us say you just drew a sketch. We say, okay, we're gonna say yes. Then at the hearing, we get a survey and the survey looks good. And then they make that the Mylar.
Right. Like this certainly made it easier for us.
Absolutely. It does. And most people do, but like Eric's your comments last time was that you don't require it. And he's absolutely right. We can't require it, but so you have the sketch plan, then which you make the survey at the final hearing. And if you sign off on that at the final hearing, they have 90 days to make the Mylar. So that's why those timelines are there, but we don't have the requirements of that. But I think since these forms were created, I'm guessing somewhere around 20 something years ago, things have changed a little bit. So
well, we didn't have digital services back then anyway.
No.
Now we do, and that makes everything much easier.
Right.
And for us who are virtually meeting tonight, it would be so easy for us to be able to pull that up and be referencing. And you could pull it up, Bill, in the select board room and show it on the screen, which I know we've done in some cases.
Even beyond that, like we can have a digital database. People are like, oh, I need to see a subdivision record. Great, just go online. It's there, and like all the forms are there because we just upload them and we don't need to keep paper anymore.
Right.
So
I mean that would be something I personally would wholeheartedly support.
How about I think we need to prod our town attorney a little bit and to get some sort of answer. How about if we give them just this minimal new language to add and maybe a deadline?
This language is this would be on the application. It wouldn't be part of the ordinance. When we're talking about changing the ordinance was about requiring a survey at the onset.
Right.
I don't think we really want to do that. The ordinance talks about the things that they have to provide us, but the application we have a little more flexibility in the application.
But we also talked about some language that a survey would be preferred and would be required.
Required at the final hearing, not at the initial hearing.
Yeah.
And that's already in there.
But is the preferred part in there?
The preferred part, the ordinance doesn't talk about the application process. Yeah. Really, like I'll look at it, but I don't think it actually like lists the actual language the application does. Mm-hmm. So I think we can add the preferred part for the survey to the application and be okay. But I'll take a look at it and see what we come up with, and we'll bring it up next meeting.
Okay. And you'll contact the town attorney one more time?
I will do my best.
Okay. Okay, anything more on this? Okay, let's finish up with minutes from March 7th.
Move to approve the minutes of March 7th.
Okay.
Second.
Thanks, Jerry.
Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the minutes of March 7th, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay. I abstain because I was not at the meeting.
Okay. All right. Anything else for our meeting tonight? Okay. A motion to adjourn is in order.
So move.
Thanks, Jim. And a second by Dana. Okay, we're adjourned.